dream of starting something game-changing? Then Visa can help make it happen. Maybe it's creating and selling your own customized kicks for cats, or transforming your dorm into a plushy pop-up shop, or finally going mainstream with your streaming side hustle. The NFL is full of game changers. Just think about watching Patrick Mahomes during his MVP season and knowing as you watched every single game that the league was never going to be the same. Whatever you're bold enough to try, Visa has the power to help bring your game-changing ideas to life. Visa. Anyone can change the game. Saxx underwear is legitimately life-changing. They have the softest styles for everyday wear, and their sport line is next level. I'm very particular about my athletic shorts. I like them to have a certain feel. I like them to have compression shorts built in and have the right amount of support. The Saxx shorts that I got instantly became my favorite ones. The Gainmaker 2-in-1 short comes with an integrated ballpark pouch that keeps everything where you want it, but is still incredibly comfortable. And here's the kicker. Everything is backed by Saxx Comfort Guarantee. That's 100% satisfaction or your money back. All you need to know about how great Saxx products are is that the Diggs brothers, Steph and Trayvon, are both some of their biggest proponents. Their patent technology with the ballpark pouch is a built-in hammock that keeps your stuff in place. So naturally, it made sense with these two guys who are great at securing the ball. So head on over to saxx.com/maze and get 10% off plus free shipping using promo code MAZE today. That's Saxx, saxx.com/MAYS and promo code MAZE at checkout for 10% off and free shipping. This episode of the Athletic Football Show is brought to you by Kentucky Fried Chicken. That's finger licking good. Make everyone in the family happy with a 12-piece meal from KFC. Get all your favorites, like 12 pieces of their freshly prepared world-famous chicken, 3 drums, 3 thighs, 3 breasts, 3 wings, 3 large sides of your choice, and 6 biscuits. Order now on the KFC app or at kfc.com.
This is the Athletic Football Show.
Welcome to the Athletic Football Show. Today is Monday, September 12th. I'm Robert Mays. Joining me today, it's my good friend Mitchell Schwartz. Mitch, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing excellent. Wonderful week one. How about you?
Yeah, it seemed to go pretty well for you and your guys over there in the desert. I'm sure you had a good time watching that game.
I was honestly, the end of like the 1 p.m. Eastern slate was like right before that, and it was like so overwhelming. And then like right into the Chiefs game and a couple other good ones at that 325 slate. It was a little bit overwhelming, honestly.
I was not ready for it. I never am. And this is only your second season having to do this, where you're having to endure all of the games coming at you at once. So you have less experience with that than I do. I have no excuse at this point. I've been doing this full time for like 10 years, and I'm still never ready for what week one feels like.
So I know you go to the bar and you have all the TVs and you kind of make sure.
Oh, no, I do it at home now. I watch it at home now.
I know that you used to, and so this is my first year in my new house, and I have a system that I designed for Sundays where I can split my screen 4 ways, so I can have like my favorite 4 games on. And I've only ever watched 2 games at once. My old place, I used to have 2 TVs. I had a remote in each hand, left, right. I'd go back and forth between the 4 games, but I'd do it more manually. And having 4 games on at once is like very overstimulating, and it's like difficult to kind of watch everything at once, because the second you like turn to another game, oh, well, play just happened. Oh, I missed that. I'm not quite sure what happened. So the fact that you used to like go and have all these screens going at once, like I think that's actually more impressive now that I've seen 4 at one time. And so I commend you for what you used to do, even though it sounds like you changed up your setup now.
We're going to talk a little bit today about how long it takes a team to settle into the season. How real is week one? When do you actually become the team that you are? I've talked to a couple people in the league, coaches, GMs, not even by Halloween do they feel like they know exactly what type of team they are. It takes a long, long time. So I'm going to give myself through week 4 to get back in game watching shape. The same way that NFL teams don't kind of come into their own until at least 4 or 6 weeks into the season. I feel like that's how I am with watching games. Even though I can have 4 games going at once, it takes me at least a month to actually be able to watch all 4 games at once.
So I'm going to blame the NFL here, because preseason game 4 used to be all the games were on that same Thursday night. And now you might not have had as many viewing opportunities in terms of all the networks and red zone and all that stuff. But you could at least still kind of like track all the games happening in a 6-hour window or so, because I think they all went off at about 7 p.m. local. And now we don't have that. We have the 3 preseason games. They're trying to get like as many games on all the networks as possible. So even preseason game 3 is over 4 or 5 days. So they haven't allowed us to prepare for all these games at once either. So NFL, shame on you, because you're not preparing us to consume your product.
Well, we're going to dig through week 1 here. We're going to dig through all of your guys' questions. Really appreciate everyone that took the time to send them in. This year, you're not going to be on with us every week, but we are going to do this every so often during the season. You are officially retired. Last year at this time, we weren't able to say that. So congratulations on that. And congratulations on you being able to enjoy your retirement. That's why we're not going to make you be tied to a computer at 3:00 every Monday, but we're going to do this every so often, and really excited to have you for the first one, because we got some questions just about what it's like to be in the league and what it's like to kind of feel like a player in the league early in the season, including our first one here from Jacob Grimm, who says, wanted to ask, how much does game 1 matter in the course of a season? Is it the actual starting point? Preseason training camp is more of a prelude. Are there any fundamental flaws that are revealed? 4 interceptions from Joe Burrow. Or should the reaction be more along the lines of, it happens. Happy to not have to consider theoretical stocks or results, but actually get to see the games played. I agree on that side of it. But as a player, someone in the league, how did you guys treat the first game of the season? Was it really an indication of everything that was to come, or was it kind of a trial run for a lot of stuff that wasn't necessarily indicative of what was going to follow?
I'd say it's not, I don't think we want to say trial run, but I think you try not to overreact in either direction. And so if you're the Chiefs right now, you're saying, all right, we played a great game. This is what we expect, though. These are our expectations. And, this isn't some incredible feat that we just had. Like, this is what we wanted to do. Our goal is to win the Super Bowl this year. Our goal is to be a dominant offense, a dominant team. And so this is what we expected all along. And we're not going to think, oh, we've arrived. It was one good game, and now we can just coast the rest of the way. And conversely, the teams that don't have the weeks that they wanted, which I'm sure we'll talk about it, but I was surprised how little like true optimism and good football we saw in week 1. That was my kind of grand takeaway. But those teams that didn't perform the way they wanted, not just completely putting their head in the sand and, oh man, this is terrible, everything's falling, I'm terrible. But as a player in the moment, you probably do lean more into that than not. Like, you do get emotional. It is exciting to either go out there, play the first week, do it exactly the way that you wanted to, or not. And then you're super bummed because you just went through this whole training camp, all this preparation, preseason. Now you got 2 weeks to prepare for the first game, and then it just doesn't happen, and you're super down on yourself. So it's important to go through and figure out what the important stuff is and what the learning stuff is and what just didn't work. I think about last year, the Green Bay New Orleans game. I mean, that game had no indication on what was going to happen the rest of the season. And I think we would say this year, the Green Bay game probably is a little bit more indicative of what we might see from Green Bay. Although, I mean, I know they had their 2 tackles down, they had their now top receiver down, but I think it looked a little uglier than just kind of a fluke game. And so in situations like
that,
how
do you determine that though? Like, how do you parse through all of that? Because it's so difficult. Like that game, the Rams game, I always have a hard time, and we're going to get a question about this, which I absolutely love, but I always have a hard time figuring out what's real and what's not from all the results of week 1. I mean, you can say some stuff after these games happen that makes you look pretty fucking stupid. So I tend not to try to say anything definitive after these games happen one way or the other.
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult. And, as a player, again, it's usually we're harder on ourselves than anyone else. Now, some guys need the hard coaching. Some guys need to kind of get that feedback. But like, as an offensive lineman, especially, you're looking at 2 different metrics. You're looking at, did I use the right technique and did I accomplish the goal? And so I think for everybody, you're looking through, all right, the last month and a half has been mostly about ingraining proper mechanics, proper techniques, muscle memory, all those things. It's not just about did this succeed or not. And so you're really being critical on yourself, in that kind of granular way. Like, am I doing the right things to put myself in a position to succeed? Now, again, that's where as a player, it's a little bit more difficult to process from result. And so you do feel like, oh man, I gave up that sack. And even though the quarterback was at 11 yards, like, it's still my fault. I still know, I'm supposed to get the guy. But when you look at it in that manner, like, well, I had the guy blocked at 11 yards. Theoretically, that should be on the quarterback. You just don't feel that way. You feel like you let someone down. So it's really kind of collaborative. It depends on the coaching staff, how they want to coach. lot of the New England tree has a history of not disseminating that information in the nicest of ways. And so, it kind of depends on the coach and how they want to meet it out. But I think looking at the things that are repeatable, the things that are going to give you kind of that success over the long run of, am I doing things the right way? Is this the right process? Is this going to yield the right results, week after week, kind of scheme and opponent dependent?
We're getting a little bit granular here, but I want to keep digging into this a little bit because I'm really curious. When you have a game plan that you devise for week one, I think there are two different things that I'm interested in. One, you do a lot of the stuff you did the season before, right? The Rams did not get blitzed in the game that they played on Thursday night. They had 11 personnel on 100% of their snaps. A lot of the things that they were doing, some of the empty stuff, a lot of the things they did last year. And Buffalo was clearly prepared for it. They had a very good defensive game plan. They jumped on everything that they had shown a year ago. The Chiefs, on the other hand, played against the Cardinals team that blitzed them on 45% of their dropbacks after Mahomes was the least blitz quarterback in the league last year. So how do you kind of figure out, all right, we're going to try something, maybe it'll work, maybe it won't. How do you figure out, all right, if this game plan didn't necessarily hit, but we were expecting something different? All of those different factors, I feel like, have to play into what week one feels like for a given team. And it can be uglier or better than it's going to look over the course of the season if you get jumped on or you jump on somebody.
Yeah, for sure. And that's, trying to find your identity early in the year, as much as we can say, oh, the Rams kind of did all the stuff that they did last year. Well, they did it with a different offensive line, with a different group of skill guys. I mean, Stafford's elbow has been talked about enough. We don't know exactly where he falls in terms of health and feeling the same way he did last year, but they have to find their identity this year. Last year McVay was able to lean on the 5 wide stuff. He was able to lean on the downfield passing attack because of the arm and because of the offensive line. Obviously, after the Thursday game, we completely understand that Andrew Whitworth no longer there. There's a couple different things on the interior as well that are different, and maybe they were trying to say, okay, well, we think these guys are good replacements and we can still do what we need to do and get the ball downfield. And that wasn't the case. So now maybe McVay has to realize, okay, I can't do what I did last year. I tried it. It didn't work. And I'm going to mix it up. Or he says, you know what, this is just a good front four. This is one of the best defenses in the NFL last year, and a defense that a lot of people had as a top 3, if not top 1 defense. And this is just one bad game against a really good group, and we're going to stick with what we do. So that's the interesting thing, is the adjustments in week 2, whether you think, oh, this is, more of the same, or whether you think, okay, I really need to make some adjustments because, going back to last year again, Buffalo, their offensive line looked awful in week 1. Well, they ran up against the Pittsburgh Steelers and Watt and Hayward and that buzzsaw of a defensive front. And so that wasn't really indicative of what their full season would look like on the offensive line. And so that's, again, to your question, it's hard to figure out, is this just the opponent we faced and maybe the game plan was a little bit off given that opponent, or is this something that's structural that's going to take us through the rest of the year that we need to fix and we need to change schematically and change it like right now?
Are you really worried about the Rams? Or do you feel like it is just a 1-week sample against a defense that's pretty built to take advantage of them in those moments?
I would say I'm a little bit worried about them. The reason I wouldn't be is because I think he can pull the scheme back and make it more O-line friendly. If he goes back to running the ball and the play action and kind of the quick hitting stuff, that makes it easier on the offensive line. And maybe he's realizing like, hey, we can't live in the drop back pass world. And that's okay. We have the scheme, we have the history, we have still the weapons. I mean, it's not like they're deficient weapon wise. It's not like they're deficient from, a quarterback standpoint. So they can do that. They can, switch things around and kind of revert to a system that's a bit friendlier, especially for those guys up front. So I'm not quite as worried. And, McVay's got a pretty awesome history of figuring things out on the offensive side. It's just whether he becomes predictable if that does become the case.
All right, next one here. Brad Lowe said, my question is, what is the worst take that you made after a previous week 1? You said a team would make the Super Bowl and they end up finishing last place in their division. I don't know if it was a take, but I was digging through all the previous week 1s over the last 7-8 years as I've been covering the league. And there were 2 that stood out to me. That first game was Sam Bradford in Minnesota. I was like, man, could this work? What is this going to look like over the course of the entire year? And then he gets hurt almost instantly and it ends up not mattering. But the one that really sticks with me, in 2015, I went to the Titans-Bucks game in week 1 in Tampa. That was Marcus Mariota and Jameis Winston when they were the first and second picks in the draft. They played each other in week 1. It was one of the last things I ever did for Grantland. It was like a month before the site folded. In that game, Marcus Mariota went 13 of 15 and threw 4 touchdown passes, and the Titans won big. And I was like, oh man, like, is Marcus Mariota going to be like the next star quarterback in the NFL? The Titans went 3 and 13 that season. So the moments like that are very important to remember as you try to take week 1 and put it into context for what it's going to look like over the next 4 or 5 months here. Do you have any as a player that you're like, this was not exactly what it was going to look like over the course of the year, where you guys looked good or bad in week 1? We got some technical issues. Can you hear me?
I got some technical difficulties here, so I'm trying to figure out this.
I'll keep talking. So there's a couple others that I'm embarrassed by.
If you could take over for a little bit.
I'm trying to think of some others that were particularly bad. The Packers game last year obviously was particularly bad, and they ended up winning 13 games and nearly going to the Super Bowl. The other one that I feel like I should have been better about in the moment. There was that year a couple seasons ago that Trevor Siemian started 4-0 for the Broncos, and I remember writing about that for The Ringer. Please don't go look that up, because that Broncos team did not end up being very good. Shockingly, because Trevor Siemian was their quarterback. We're going to take a quick break. From cringing at the pump to getting an eye-popping check at your favorite restaurant, inflation is hitting all of us where it hurts. And it really hurts. That's why I started using Upside. Upside is an incredible app for anyone who buys gas, groceries, or dines out, which is most of us. With every purchase, I'm earning cash back thanks to Upside. To get started, download the free Upside app and use my promo code TAFS and get $5 or more cash back on your first purchase of $10 or more. Next, claim an offer for whatever you're buying on Upside. Check in at the business, pay as usual with a credit or debit card, and get paid. In comparison to credit card rewards or loyalty programs, you can earn 3 times more cash back with Upside. Upside users are earning more than $1 million every week. That's probably why they have a 4.8 star rating on the App Store. Download the free Upside app and use our promo code TAFS to get $5 or more cash back on your first purchase of $10 or more. That's $5 or more cash back on your first purchase of $10 or more using promo code TAFS. We have a few more weeks of nice weather here in Chicago. I'm trying to do everything I can to get outside, enjoy the weather, enjoy the city. And Allbirds makes it so easy to be outside and active. Allbirds creates shoes and clothing that are better for you and better for the planet using a revolutionary roster of premium natural materials, like their popular Tree Runner sneaker. Why is it called the Tree Runner? Because it's made from eucalyptus tree fiber, a lightweight, breathable, and silky soft material, making the Tree Runner the perfect everyday shoe for getting the most out of your sunny days. I love all the Allbirds shoes that I have. I have the Tree Runners and a couple other pairs. They're so functional and light. It's easy to travel with them, running errands with them on, actually going for a run. They're my everyday running shoes now. All right, let's get to our third question here. Cody Drymeyer asked one I think you're particularly well suited for. Can you discuss which quarterback is the most frustrating to pass block for? Russ or Pat look especially frustrating to me, but I could see a young quarterback who keeps drifting into pressure, making an experienced offensive line pull their hair out. Just take your headphones out. Week 1 for everybody, guys. This is great.
So in terms of quarterbacks, and this is a question I get asked a lot. So the most frustrating quarterback is someone that like you don't know exactly where they're going to be, whether the guy's mobile or not, whether he stays in the pocket. Like that's not that important in the grand scheme of things. I think it's actually a benefit to offensive linemen that have a quarterback that can scramble. I played for a few. I played for Johnny in Cleveland, which is one specific example. I played for Mahomes in Kansas City, who people will say is a different example. And when I started playing with Mahomes and he started doing this thing and everyone would say like, have you played with a running quarterback before? What's it like? I was like, yeah, I have, but it's different when a guy's like breaking the pocket and he's escaping the pocket to get on the move to throw in space. And so that's something that's, uniquely different about guys like Pat and even Johnny, where it helps you, because eventually the defense is going to realize, like, man, I can't just sit here and rush upfield and let the quarterback slip underneath and get out of the pocket. So now they're telling their defensive end, probably the guy that's facing me, because as a right-hander, they're going to escape to my side, like, hey, you got to keep contained. You have to, hold your ground. You're not going to be able to rush upfield as much as you want. Maybe take two less inside moves per game, because, again, if the right tackle washes you down, you're now leaving an opening for the quarterback to run to the right and to really make some headway. So I think it does benefit the offensive lineman. And the hard part with, quarterbacks and guys who are inconsistent is, we, for the most part, know where the guy's supposed to be. The quarterback's supposed to be at 7 yards, at 8 yards, 9 yards, 10 yards. You go back to like Joe Flacco when I was younger and I was in Cleveland. We watched a lot of Baltimore tape, obviously in the same division. And Flacco was a guy who dropped really deep. They were in the gun. He's a tall guy. They would do 5-7 step drops and he'd be 10, 11, 12 yards. But it was consistent. He did that all the time. And so, Marshall Yanda, which I know is one of your favorite guys, he could take that pass kick and basically be like an offensive tackle and set back 5 or 6 yards. One, because if a guy ever tried to bull rush him, he was the strongest guy and he could just clamp him down immediately and pass over. But two, because Flacco was so deep that it gave them a little bit of wiggle room to work with. And same with the tackles, who were vertical set guys. You could set for a quarterback that's 11 yards deep. And if a guy goes inside at 7 yards, which normally would lead to a pressure or a sack, well, Flacco's still 4 yards away from that, and he doesn't even feel it or notice it, and he just sits there. So there's a consistency to the quarterback's drop that makes it palatable for the offensive lineman. Now, in a perfect world, you want Tom Brady, and we've seen the charts that he's there at 8.5 yards every single time. There's very little movement. Like, yeah, there's some predictability there, and that would be a great thing to have. A guy like Russell Wilson, that if he's moving around in the pocket, if one drop it's 8 yards, one drop it's 11 yards, one drop it's 9.5, and then you add kind of holding the ball, waiting for something to happen. Oh, I'm going to sidestep to the right, sidestep back to the left. That's when things become difficult. So it's not the fact that the guy runs in particular, because I think running benefits the offensive line. Again, I've been in a game before where Mahomes got out of the pocket against the guy I was blocking, and the guy I was blocking got cussed out by his coach, and he's just screaming, "You've got to have contain. You got to keep contain." And I'm thinking, like, all right, there's my advantage. Like, the guy I'm going against, in his head, every single pass play is thinking, whatever I do, I can't give up contain because I can't let Mahomes out. And so I have the advantage over that guy because I have the freedom to block him however I want, but he doesn't have the freedom to rush me however he wants.
Can you hear me? I was going to ask a follow-up question, but apparently follow-up questions are going to be difficult at this point. All right. One sec while Mitch fixes his audio here. Can you hear me now? It's good stuff. All right. Now you guys can just look at me for a little while, which is great. Well, so a little bit about the plan we're going to have for the rest of the week. Might as well dig into that here. Me and Sando are going to be doing a live Monday Night Football reaction show tonight after the game ends. Obviously, Mike has a ton of history with Russell Wilson, wrote about the Russell Wilson-Pete Carroll divorce a little bit today. It's a fascinating game for so many different reasons, not only Russ going back to Cleveland, but that Broncos offense and what they look like is one of the biggest questions that I have about the entire season. Structurally, how that marriage ends up unfolding. So we're going to have a live reaction to that game shortly after the game ends, similar to what we do on Sunday nights. So I would be looking at around 10:45 Central Time, 11:45 Eastern tonight after that game is finished. On Wednesday, Ollie Connolly from the Read Optional, who has been on the show before, is one of my favorite scheme people to talk to. Ollie does such a fantastic job. We are going to talk about some of the units that we really didn't dig into on Sunday night's show, but we want to examine a little bit more. We're going to be chatting about the Ravens defense, the Dolphins offense, really some of the groups that were mysteries to us coming into the season, but we weren't really sure what it was going to look like, and we didn't really have time or space to dig into those teams yesterday. Thursday, don't have a guest quite yet. Just a heads up for you guys, the Thursday show without Lindsay here is going to be kind of figuring out what the stories of the week have been. I'm talking about some of the news, just some of the conversations that the football world is having over the course of those few days. We're going to dig into those every single Thursday. That comes up in the morning. And then Thursday afternoon, Deontay and Nate will be joining me live here as they do every single week to do our preview show, which we're really looking forward to. If you guys have not listened to, there we go. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, but I feel really bad. So hopefully this works.
You're totally fine. As long as you can hear me, we're good to go. Last thing that I totally forgot. Wednesday afternoon this week, first episode of Prospects to Pros with Andy Staples and Dane Brugler is going to be debuting on the feed. So please go check that out. They're going to talk about some of the rookies and how they played in the NFL in week one. They're going to be chatting about what has happened in college football so far, some of the movement with those prospects. So I forgot that. There's a lot of shows. It's hard to keep track of. I did not plan on having this conversation. So now we're back. Let's get to the next question here. Patrick McGuire says, at some point, don't the Jets need to start winning some games? I hear nothing but glowing reviews of Joe Douglas, but isn't the point for this to actually win some games someday? Love the podcast. Simon Dixon also already wants the Jets to trade multiple drafts worth of picks for Lamar Jackson. So that's how you know that week one went well. I don't know how much of that, Bill, of the Jets-Ravens game that you watched yesterday. I didn't watch a ton of it. I went back and I watched it this morning just to get a better sense of it. I always feel like this is the takeaway I have when teams win games in pretty deflating fashion, especially in week one. That's how I felt about the Colts yesterday, even though they didn't lose. But you go back and watch, it's like, I feel a little bit better than I thought I would, given the final score. After what happened with the Jets and after an off season of optimism, even with Zach Wilson not in there, how are you feeling about the Jets after 1 week?
Not good. There are two offensive tackles down, which is not ideal. And yeah,
you saw that yesterday too. George Fant had a problem a couple different times with Houston on an island, which is not, he's switched positions twice in the last month. Like, they did not put him in a good spot, but there were definitely some problems with them up front, which is to be expected considering all the issues that they've had.
Yeah, he's a guy they want to extend because he played really well last year. And last year he was given one position and said, all right, go play this. And I think maybe once he switched during the season when Mekhi got hurt, but he was supposed to play left tackle, and then they switched him to right tackle, and then a week before the season they switch him back to left tackle because Dwayne Brown gets hurt, and that's kind of unfair to put on him and to have him do that. I think, Joe Flacco's the quarterback. I don't know how much more in depth we need to go about that. I think, we needed to see it. Really curious what it's going to look like. But yeah, these guys need to start winning games, and I saw, to the point of, Joe Douglas has had great drafts and all these things. It's like, yeah, you had 3 first-round picks. Like, you're probably going to have a good draft. Like, it's really hard to have 3 picks and not come away with everyone saying, oh, what a great draft. 3 first-rounders, even if they're reaches and you think that, those aren't maybe the best guys, you can always excuse it away by saying they had an extra one and they're able to reach for a guy. So I think the results definitely need to come. Now, whether they're able to kind of do the Wilson dance and say, oh, well, it's the quarterback and we need to find a new one and blah, 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 and whether that gets back on Douglas for, not having the right quarterback and choosing the wrong guy and all that stuff, that's where it becomes really interesting. But the same with Saleh. I don't know that we can really give a proper evaluation. I know everyone still talks about him really positively and he's a great leader and all this stuff, but at some point it has to show on the field. You have to get results.
Going back and watching their defense yesterday, the big plays, you just see them pop up on red zone. And there was that long touchdown pass to Rashad Bateman, which you hate to see. And there was the big chunk play to Duvernay. The coverage on the play to Duvernay was fine. Bryce Hall was covering him one-on-one. They were in a dime look where they had 4 corners on the field. And we're not going to see a ton of Bryce Hall this year because of how many moves they made at cornerback. But when they're putting 4 corners on the field, that's when you get into that depth a little bit. Coverage is actually pretty good. Duvernay just made a really nice play. I thought that Sauce Gardner had a couple nice moments in that game. He had a really nice pass breakup on Mark Andrews when they were trying to take advantage of him in kind of a funky formation down near the goal line. One guy who had a really rough day was LaMarcus Joyner on a couple different plays. He had a field flipping pass interference penalty that just didn't need to happen. Like, he was in decent position and just kind of flailed at the end, and it ended up becoming a huge play in the course of the game. And I don't know what he was looking at on the Rashad Bateman touchdown. He was clearly him and Gardner were standing next to each other. There was some sort of miscommunication there, and I would assume that's going to go on Joyner. And there was, on the second Duvernay touchdown, the safety they were in like a quarters look, and the safety that was on the backside where Duvernay eventually ran, like, pulled down onto Andrews really hard. And I don't know if that was the right decision or what the coverage was supposed to be, but that was another miscommunication. And that's what it seemed like yesterday. All of those plays are one guy kind of screwing up on the back end. And we've talked about this before. That's all you need. You need one guy not necessarily understanding his assignment or the spacing, and that's what ends up happening. But other than that, I thought the defense played okay. The pass rush was not where you'd want it to be, considering the amount of investment they put in that group this year. Thought that John Franklin Myers had some nice moments, but they weren't consistently getting after Lamar, especially with backup offensive lineman in the game and a backup left tackle having to come in at a certain point. Patrick McCarry played, I think, 25 snaps after Juwan James hurt his Achilles. Back up to the backup. Yeah. And the Jets got a decent amount of pressure, but it's not like they were overwhelming a banged up Baltimore offensive line in this game. And I think that's somewhat of a concern. The receiver fell down that Joe Flacco threw. There was a 20-yard punt that the Jets had in this game that gave the Ravens back the ball at the 45-yard line, a missed field goal, here and there, some stuff that you don't expect to happen every game. And with Joe Flacco as your quarterback, hopefully you're going to have some better results. I thought that the defense overall played pretty well, all things considered, with a couple really noticeable slip-ups. And, if Joyner's going to be a starting safety over the course of the year, he's going to have to be better than he was yesterday. Like, those are pretty much my takeaways from what that game looked like.
Well, before you said anything about the pass rush and the front four, I was thinking, like, this isn't the greatest test for them. I know everyone's excited about them, and they got some guys, and they got, a rookie who's doing well, and Lawson's going to be back and coming back from the injury. But going up against Baltimore is never going to be the greatest test, even a depleted Baltimore offensive line. So I think that would be one thing in terms of optimism as a unit that I look for going forward is you're not going to get a real test of how the front four is going to fare against Baltimore. Like, it's very difficult, especially once the game starts getting in Baltimore's favor. It starts tilting towards them being able to control the tempo, the pace, the tenor, all those things. So I think we can
even
still
formationally, you have so many chips and so many guys giving help. I mean, there's so many bodies in pass protection when you're playing that Baltimore team that I think it's going to be difficult to gauge. But even in moments where it was just kind of a straight 4-man rush drop back situation on like third down, it's not like they were taking over. There was one particularly devastating Lamar scramble on 3rd and 8 that was absolutely brutal. But in that moment, it's like, I just imagine Robert Saleh tearing his hair out. You combine that with a 20-yard shanked punt and a missed field goal. And it was a frustrating day overall. But this Jets defense was the worst defense in football last season. They were dead last in defensive DVOA. They played better than that yesterday for the most part. And I think there has to be a little smidge of optimism from that. But overall, I can understand being pretty frustrated as a Jets fan. You have this offseason when you spend all this money. You have 3 first-round picks. Like, here we go. Year 2, the rebuild is in full force. And then you lose by multiple scores in week 1. And it feels like you never had a chance.
Well, so the thing is, you went back and you watched the film with like a critical eye, and you're looking for all these kind of specific things and what's the coverage and how's this guy playing it. The fans didn't do that. They watched the game on TV and they saw more of the same, get down early, no offense, no pass rush, Lamar making a few plays, and I thought our defense was more athletic than that. We're busting coverages again. We can't get to the quarterback, and we can't score. And our special teams isn't good. So from your perspective, you can go through and say, I was more optimistic than I thought based on the box score. But from the Jets fan base that's watching this, it all looks the same to them. And there doesn't look like there's any hope, there's any progress, there's any optimism. So it'll take, a couple more weeks. And I do think it's fair to, kind of judge him before Wilson gets back. I think there's enough kind of infrastructure stuff that we can say, all right, this stuff we like, this stuff we don't like. Once Wilson gets in there, you can give a little bit more of a complete package overview. But defensively, especially, like, there's not much that the quarterback's going to change about that. Like, you might want to say, they'll be trailing a little bit less and they'll be in more advantageous pass rush situations. But I think you can still give them, a full grade over these next few weeks.
I thought all of the defensive backs that they added this offseason showed up at least once or twice in a positive way, except for Joyner. Obviously, they didn't add him this offseason, but Jordan White had a huge pass breakup again. Sauce Gardner had a couple moments. I didn't really notice DJ Reed, which is probably a good thing. So other than that, I think that the Joyner thing is what I'd be most concerned about. The other thing I wanted to mention from that game, lastly, Justin Madubuike was incredible. He was so good in this game, and he's in year 3. He's 24 years old. He was drafted really young. He was a 3rd round pick, and with the Ravens, a lot of the pushback that we got when we picked the Ravens to win the AFC North, both me and Nate on the show, was, well, what does the Ravens front really look like? They don't have that many guys up there, and that's true. But if Madubuike is going to be a high-level interior pass rusher, they had a lot of wonky blitz looks that they brought on 3rd down. Patrick Queen had a couple plays as a pass rusher. Again, Justin Houston took advantage of his one-on-ones. This is just a team that I trust to piece it together, and they're going to be weird enough in some of the stuff that they try and throw at the wall and to find passing situations that they've been able to manufacture pass rush consistently over the years without true dominant edge rushers over the last 3, 4, 5 seasons. And if they're going to have really, really good players on the interior, can that kind of supplement what that group looks like overall? So again, banged up Jets offensive line, offensive tackles swapping every other week, it seems like, but I do think that the early returns on the way that the Ravens front played were pretty good.
So my question for you is, do you think the Ravens defensively should be more of the high variance, kind of turnover happy, take some risks, because you can bank on a certain level of offensive performance, I feel like, with that offense with Lamar. And so if you're saying, you don't quite have the guys to just, hey, let's turn the front 4 loose, kind of like Buffalo did on Thursday night, do you think they should go into more of the kind of ball hawking, let them take chances, let them try to go for turnovers and kind of turn games that way? Because I think everybody doesn't think this is the old school Ravens who are going to suffocate you every drive, or you're not going to have any hope. Like, I don't know that they're a team that down in, down out, kind of drive after drive is going to be playing that awesome football. But do you think, like, just in terms of as a defense, how would you see that?
I think they're going to be conservative isn't the right word. I think they're going to play more zone. I think they're going to be more traditional in the way that they approach some of this stuff, but I still think they're going to be a 5-man pressure team. I think they're going to walk Queen down into the box a lot. I think they're going to have a lot of those looks, and they're going to bring extra guys at the quarterback a decent amount of the time. But I think they're going to play a lot of zone behind it in situations where it would have been 6-man pressures where they're playing straight man in the past. So I think that's the formula that you're going to be looking for. It's not like they're going to be trying to think of a team that just brings 4 and never blitzes and plays a ton of the zone. I mean, they're not going to be the Bills on Thursday night.
Like Gus Bradley.
Yeah, Gus Bradley is the best example. But I was trying to think of like I was not trying to think of more like a Fangio Staley tree guy, because I think they're going to play a lot more of those types of structures. But they're not going to be a team that doesn't blitz. I think they're still going to bring a decent amount of pressure, but I also think it's going to be more zone behind it and maybe not as much crazy pressures on early downs. Even though they did, I mean, there was a couple of run blitzes where Patrick Kareem was blowing shit up on 1st down. So I'm really curious to actually dig into that tape app, not just the TV copy. That's something I'm going to do over the next day or so. But it's a unit that I think I'm pretty excited about, just because I think they go a lot of different directions, and I think that they're going to be able to find some solutions. And so far, week 1 of the season, they've managed to do that. But are we going to take a break, or do we already waste our break here?
You can keep going.
All right, let's go. Next one here. JD Smith. This question I found fascinating. It's very simple, but I wanted to dig into it. JD Smith asks, whose coaching tree does Brian Daboll belong to? I think the answer to this is easy, but the fact that it's even a question, I think, is a good thing for Brian Daboll. Who would you say?
To me, he's a Belichick guy.
I agree.
From the New England tree. And I got to Cleveland after the Mangini era, which I believe Daboll was a part of. And let's just say the guys were not huge fans of that staff and kind of those thoughts. And yeah, so to me, he's like a pure Belichick New England guy. That's been a little bit of my hesitancy with him in this last cycle getting hired, because we've seen those guys that get hired, they still, for whatever reason, want to do it the Belichick way, and they think kind of the fear-based regime and making sure that you're showing guys having all their bad plays and making the atmosphere less fun, and you have to memorize all these random statistics and stuff. They think that's the way, that's the genius behind Belichick. But it does seem like he's distant enough from that past that he's been through enough other coaches, and I'd like to think McDermott was a positive influence on him as well. Just seeing a guy who's a bit more level-headed and kind of goes about things in a different way. But I think New England is the tree that he's from, but I would say because he's the furthest like from New England as a new hire, there's a chance that he's going to be doing things kind of in his own way with his spin.
I think the further away is exactly the way that I would describe it. The fact that it's even a question, I think, is a step in the right direction for Brian Daboll. He came from Alabama to Buffalo. That was the move that he made. He went from the Patriots staff to be the offensive coordinator at Alabama.
Which, to be fair, is a continuation of the Belichick tree.
It absolutely is. I will say a couple different things, though. I think that being around the college game was very good for him as an offensive coach. Some of the stuff that he picked up, some of the places he was looking for ideas, I think he's been more than willing to steal stuff from the college ranks during his time in Buffalo, and it's been really, really good for them. I mean, we talked about this on the show we did with with Pat DeMarco and with Blake Bortles about some of the new head coaches in the league. When they came in 2020 with the offensive plan in that spring in Daboll's second season, it looked nothing like it looked in 2019. In 2019, the bones of the Bills' offense were very similar to what they would have done in New England over the course of the last 2 decades. But they really revamped it in 2020 and then again in 2021. So I think he's moving further and further away from those New England roots, schematically, personality-wise. He was like dancing with players in the locker room yesterday after they went for 2 and won the game. And that's not the most important thing in the world, but I do feel like it's a pretty drastic departure from what the culture feels like in New England. So this idea that somebody who would listen to this show and be willing to take the time to send in a question doesn't instantly know that Brian Daboll is a branch off the New England coaching tree, I think is a very good thing.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with you there. And again, no one ever really questions. I mean, there's a couple instances recently, but for the most part, the Belichick tree guys, they leave. No one questions the acumen or the ability to coach an offense. No one questioned McDaniels when he left, or kind of these defensive coordinators when they leave. It's the personality. It's how are you going to run the system? How are you going to design things? I don't know if it's still the case, but when there was 8 Andy Reid disciples and 25% of the league was Andy Reid guys, it's because he creates that culture that works. Like everything is laid out in front of you. There's goals, there's, things to achieve, and you treat guys right. And, you don't harp on the negative, you accentuate the positive. And if you need to be stern, you be stern. But for the most part, it's an awesome work environment. You wake up in the morning. I mean, honestly, it's the night before. You're not worried the night before, like, oh man, am I going to get embarrassed in the meeting tomorrow? Like, if you play poorly, when you go there, it's not going to be fun to watch the film of yourself playing poorly, but you're not worried like, oh, is he going to show my 2 bad plays to the team and make a example out of me? And those are the kinds of things that like ruin you as a player in terms of stress and the things that you worry about. And so as we're saying, the further away from that tree you can get, and the more you can realize that like that's not necessary. Obviously, Buffalo didn't need to show lowlights every single day the past couple of years to have the success that they did. So I'm hopeful that personality-wise, that's the biggest thing that he's learned over these last few years.
All right, next question here. Abigail Lawson asks, I'm a Patriots fan, and like most fans, have been very concerned about coaching since it was announced that Matt Patricia and Joe Judge would be sharing offensive coaching duties. During the game yesterday, one of the commentators said it might not matter who was calling plays on offense as long as we get results. Obviously, we didn't get a good result today. Pretty skeptical about this, but I'm wondering what you guys think about uncertainty with the coaching play calling in the locker room and what it may do to the execution of plays outside of the quality of said coaching or play calling itself. So if you're in the locker room, if you're a guy on the Patriots, and there's all of this chatter about who's calling plays and about who's in charge of this, how do you think that manifests for people that are actually on the team?
Well, the question is if they know who's calling plays.
Yes.
Because as the lineman, like, I don't necessarily know which guy is in Pat's ear giving him the direction. Like, I don't know, is it Coach Reid? Is it Bieniemy? Is it the quarterback coach? Is it the offensive line coach if there's a run call? Like, I don't know how that kind of runs. I have a good idea of who designs the offense and who has final say over the play call. But as an offensive lineman for New England, especially, I doubt Belichick went in there and said, hey guys, this is how it's going to run. This guy's going to handle this. This guy's going to handle that. Play calling is going to be on this guy. Like, I just don't think that that's the way information gets disseminated in New England. So I'd probably be asking Mac, like, hey, who's the guy in your ear? Who's telling you what to do? Who's calling the plays? Like, I would be really curious as the lineman to know that. So I think there's an element of, now they have done a good job, typical New England fashion, being tight-lipped and like no one's giving information about it. But I think there's an element of like, do the guys even really know, aside from like the quarterback room and maybe the skill guys, like what's happening? Does the offensive line know like this is who's in charge of structuring the offense and calling the offense? So from that perspective, I'd be pestering the quarterbacks and be like, hey Mac, like who do you got in your ear on this one? Then after the first couple of preseason games, I mean, we saw a couple different shots of, Patricia and Judge calling it independently. So I'd probably be asking again, like, hey, who's calling the plays? Is it Belichick who's really calling it, but he's letting Patricia like mouth it, so he looks like he's the one doing it? So there'd be a lot of intrigue for me, and I think you would start talking about that in the locker room, especially if things aren't working and if things are messy and if the success isn't happening. And we saw throughout camp, there would be a lot of articles and a lot of reports on the offense didn't look quite as good today, and the offense this, the offense that. And so eventually you're just like, what's going on? Who's in charge? And you really go to the quarterback. I mean, you're obviously not going to go to the coaching staff asking those kinds of probing questions. So that would be interesting in the locker room, especially if you've got a little bit of an older group on the offensive line and an older group in the skill position rooms who are curious and who kind of understand how things typically work or how they used to work. And now they just aren't quite sure.
I'm curious, going between different staffs that you played for, how much does transparency change between staffs? I mean, in New England, like you said, it's probably a black box. There's probably not a lot of information coming out about these. This is why we're doing this. This is the setup, and this is the thought process and motivation behind it. Was that different between staffs in terms of how much they were willing to share, why they were willing to share it?
Yeah, you do see, guys have different viewpoints on that. Shanahan is excellent at that. I mean, he's always kind of the first one that I had who would give you more of the why and kind of break down exactly kind of full field why this is important, why that guy's important. And you would understand, we've got this run play and offensive line. I know that you're used to calling like, oh, the safety's down, so we're going to push to him. But on this structure, I already had the receiver 6 yards from the tackle, so he can push crack. And if you push your call one further and now you're working to the same safety the receiver's working to, that's not going to be good for us because we're going to have two guys on one. And I'm going to take that off your plate, even though it seems really simplistic. I'm going to give that to the quarterback because he's more tied into the formations than you are. And, the offensive line doesn't need to know exactly the splits of every single receiver. And so as my third year, starting to realize like, wow, there's so much more to the run game that I didn't know about. And it's cool that like I'm kind of learning why on this play we're allowed to do this and why on this play we're not allowed to do it, and why with this specific structure, like we can make that guy the call linebacker, and on this other one we're not allowed to. And so he was a guy who gave you a lot of that. And again, he would teach everybody, the receiver's job on the run play, the same as the center's job. So like everyone would know this is the angle I'm blocking for. This is where I expect the ball carrier to be. If I don't do it, this is where the play is going to break down. He's going to have to cut back. Now that guy's going to be screwed. So he was really good about that. I'd say, Kansas City is similar in a way that coach definitely gives you kind of the full idea, but they also break it up a lot more. So typically if the play doesn't involve offensive linemen, the offensive line is in their own room and they're doing their own install. And so you're not necessarily going to be in quite as many of the pass installs as you would be in some other offenses who like to install things a little bit more coherently. I'd say I prefer that style. I don't want to sit there and watch 200 jet dragon lion and learn about what a dragon and lion route is. Like I'd rather be in the offensive line room learning what 200 jet is and what my responsibilities are and what the blitzes are going to be. So I think giving you enough information, enough of the why, again, going back to the Rams, McVay, I know when he first got there, some of the vets talked about like, this is the first time a coach has ever told me like why he's asking me to do this specific thing, how it ties into the whole offense, holistically how this works. And it's really just about empowering. It's empowering your players to learn more, to understand the concept. And maybe if they come out in some odd look, some odd blitz, now this guy knows like, oh, well, he wanted me to do that because the quarterback's supposed to be here and then he's supposed to hit this guy. And we haven't talked about it because we're going against Todd Bowles, and this is the blitz he just designed 4 days ago for us. But I kind of understand the concept of what's supposed to happen. So I'll make this thing happen on the fly, and Stafford will make it work. Like, now you're empowered to think at that level, to understand the full concept. And I think it's to everybody's benefit for the coaches to kind of buy into that a little bit, and to give your guys a little bit more ownership of the offense and of the process.
Ownership is a great word. And I remember in Minnesota going up there right after the draft and spending a little bit of time and just chatting about some of the things that they were trying to instill culturally. And obviously Mike Zimmer is Mike Zimmer, and he's prickly, and there's a certain tone that a team is going to take on and a building is going to take on when he's your head coach. But it wasn't just about like this guy. This is a nice, softer, younger voice in Kevin O'Connell. I think it was about creating kind of a two-way street of dialogue about the way things worked and why they worked that way. In LA, it's chicken or the egg thing, right? You bring in a guy like Cooper Kupp, who literally has an office in the building because he spends so much time trying to give his input on what they're doing offensively. You can say, well, you brought in that type of guy and that helps foster that culture, but building that types of culture helps foster that sort of buy-in. So in Minnesota, I think that's part of the goal here is, can we make sure that we're saying, all right, you have ownership over this, you have input on this. And that allows, in those moments like you're talking about, to be a little bit more nimble, to feel like I can take these sorts of steps to make sure that I'm putting my imprint on what we're doing. And I have to assume that if you have the right type of guys in your building, that can only be a good thing in the long run.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up Minnesota, because we're seeing clips of Jair Alexander basically lamenting the fact that he's not covering Justin Jefferson. And he's like,
Yeah.
You guys see me, I'm a good player. I don't know why I'm not covering him. Like, that's obviously a guy that is not as tied into the scheme. Like, they're just getting, hey, this is what it's going to be for the week. It doesn't seem like there's much back and forth. I think if he had input and they still overrode him, he would say, like, I tried to tell them. But it wasn't even I tried to tell them. It was just like, nope, this is what the scheme was. They clearly didn't want me to cover the best receiver. And so that's a situation that you look at, getting back to our first question of, what is worrisome in week one? Like, that's a worrisome work dynamic, that guys are that frustrated in week one about the matchup that they didn't get to, guard the best wide receiver. They didn't get the input to say, hey, I want to shadow this guy. And if that wasn't going to be the game plan and you were adamant about it, you could still talk to the guy and you could still say, like, hey, I know you're awesome. We love what you do. Obviously, you're high paid and you've got all that, the accolades and stuff. Like, this is the reason we're going to use the scheme and deploy it this way. And we think this is going to be successful. But that's not the case in Green Bay right now. And so not having that empowerment, not having kind of the understanding of why this is the case led to, a frustrated guy after the game venting and probably sharing more than he really should have.
All right, let's get to our first voicemail here.
Hey, Robert, big fan. It's kind of a weird question, but I'm curious, how many games or how many plays do you usually consider for like a team to get settled in, or for average? I kind of think of in baseball, like if a guy's hitting really hot off the bat after like 10 games, is it like officially he's really good? Is he just hot? I'm just curious, what amount of time do you think it takes for a team to kind of go to their average point? That's kind of weird. Thanks.
It's not kind of weird. It's a great question. It's a very pertinent question after week one. We talked about this a little bit, but at the beginning of the show, but I think that was more about taking week one results with a grain of salt. As a player, when did you feel like, all right, this is who I am this season. This is what we are this season. How long does that take?
Well, it's funny he mentioned baseball, because it used to be in baseball that they would say that it's no longer a small sample size when Mike Trout was leading baseball in WAR. Like, however many games it took Mike Trout to finally get atop the WAR leaderboard was enough games to say it's no longer a small sample size. Now, for baseball fans, the last couple of years he's been hurt. That hasn't quite been the case, but there hasn't really been that level to say, after so many weeks the Chiefs are in first place and now, we can say it. I'd say 2 or 3 weeks gives you a pretty decent indicator. You're able to implement the first game plan, understand how that works or how it doesn't work. You're able to make some adjustments, depending on the opposition, depending on, kind of how things play out. I'd say, 2 or 3 weeks is really when you can start kind of finalizing in your mind, like, this is what we're going to be, this is what we should be. I would be curious, the DVOA guys and the guys who kind of do the qualitative and quantitative stuff, like, how many games in do they actually start making things more permanent, and do they start giving more weight to it? Because I know they have some schedule stuff and DVOA things that are more weighted towards the end of the year once things are more settled and once they have more data points. But I think within that first, 3 weeks for sure. Some people would argue 2, some would argue 4. I don't think anyone would argue 1 week. But again, you want the ability to try to implement what camp was for, have a week, have a reactionary week after that, kind of figure out good or bad what you can change, and then 1 to 2 weeks of let's implement that now and make sure that we're either continuing to do the good thing and it's staying as good as we want it to be, or we're fixing the bad stuff and now we've shown improvement and we've shown that things are getting better.
Trying to figure out, I'm trying to look it up really quickly, but I know that Football Outsiders has their DAVE rankings that are a combination of their preseason rankings and what the first few weeks of the season look like. I don't know how deep into the season that goes. I assume it's like 3 or 4 weeks at least, where they're saying, all right, we're not going to throw out what we thought coming into the season. Eventually, we will move away from that. But especially over the first month or so, we need to incorporate what expectations were supposed to be and the information that we've gotten to this point. So I think a month probably makes sense. But with the NFL, it's just so crazy because there are only 17 games. So it's always a small sample size, and things are just so volatile potentially from week to week. If you look at a team like the Bills last year and just how much their offense shifted late into the season, and we see that all the time where teams just kind of click into different versions of themselves, and sometimes that doesn't happen until week 10. So the NFL season and just this sport in general is such a living, breathing thing as it relates to how we judge certain teams qualitatively, quantitatively, whatever, that I definitely think it's more of a moving target than pretty much anything else that we deal with in the sports world.
Yeah, for sure. And I think most NFL teams work in kind of 4 quarters. And so old schedule, after 4 games, you kind of do a self-scout, like a more comprehensive self-scout. Let's look back at the whole 4 weeks, see what we like, what we didn't like. And, 4, 8, 12, 16. I'm sure a lot of you know that math. But I think that's kind of the benchmarks that those guys like to use. So after 4 weeks in their head, like, all right, we have enough data. We have shown enough that we can really do a full self-scouting analysis. But as you were talking, I kind of was thinking of college football actually, and how absolutely slow top 25 ranking changes used to be. And you could be ranked in the top 5 to start the season. And this kind of goes to the Dave point of like, all right, you're 3-1, but you haven't shown that well against, the 3 powder puffs that you scheduled. And you'd still be like number 4 in the country and it wouldn't really matter. And now I think college football, you can see people drop out of rankings, vault into the rankings a lot quicker. Whether that's getting back to the NFL, whether that's symbolic of kind of the era that we're in terms of instant results and wanting to overreact and overjudge and make definitive statements after a week or 2, I'm not exactly sure, but I do think there's an element of understanding the expectations, realizing flukiness can happen, and giving at least that 2 to 3 weeks to kind of let things settle out, and then at that point you can start kind of transitioning into what's a trend and what's not. And you made a great point as well. Like a team after week 9 can be like, all right, we started out 4-1. We're now 5-4. We had a bad stretch. Like, we're going to change. We're going to make instant changes, personnel, scheme, everything. And those could be good. Those could be bad. But that happens to most teams throughout the year, that like there's this break-even point of like, all right, something needs to change, good or bad. And that can lead to this whole renaissance, like you said, of Buffalo's offense, where you find your rhythm, you find your identity, and it could happen after week 9, after week 10.
Do you remember anything that was like that, an experience that you had deep into a season where you kind of figured out something that worked?
Yeah, Kansas City. I don't know if it was 2016 or 2017, but we were in a bit of a funk. I think we went to New York and lost to the Giants, and maybe we lost to the Jets too. I think the Jets game was when Marcus Peters chucked the flag out of bounds. And I think it was after a Buffalo game at home, which I think we also lost, where we were still doing a bunch of I formation stuff. We were in kind of the traditional old school, more Andy Reid, West Coast under center, playing with a fullback, all those things. And they kind of just said like, screw it, we're going to change. We're going to go more spread. We're going to be in shotgun more. We're going to do more read stuff. And they had done that, especially in 2015 before I got there. But going into that year and the offensive line that we had and stuff, it had leaned a little bit more traditional. And there was just a point where I was like, all right, this isn't working. Let's completely change it up. I can't remember if that was one of those times where Coach Reid kind of ceded play calling duties to Nagy. I think those things kind of get lost in terms of the actual weeks, but I think there was some mention of that, or whether he was just more involved in the play design. It was more of the college stuff, the more spread stuff. But yeah, just this isn't working. Something's got to change. And for us, it was getting out of that, kind of under center, 2-back world and getting into the shotgun spread stuff. And I think we had pretty good success. And obviously the rest of Coach Reed's offense is kind of history at this point.
All right, next one here. Jonathan Munshaw asks, thanks for the hard work as always. I was thinking about this watching the Browns game this weekend. Cade York, thinking about the whole running backs don't matter argument with Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt combining for like 200 plus total yards. My question is, who do you think is the lowest level skill running back you could have with a good offensive line? Chubb is obviously incredibly talented, but I can't help but think that Dearness Johnson would have put up Hunt's numbers with the schemes they were drawing up and pulling blocks from Joe Bitonio and Wyatt Teller. I think this is trading Hunt before the deadline is a reality, and I feel like the Browns could probably be just fine, say, with an Alexander Madison type backup. How do you handle your running back room if you were a GM? I think it all depends on the team, right? I mean, running back injuries are so constant, and you're one running back injury from the entire dynamic of the room changing. So if you look at the Browns right now, I understand why trading Kareem Hunt seems like a reasonable thing, because you have Nick Chubb, you have Dearness Johnson on the bench. Dearness Johnson is making like $1 million this year. Like, them choosing to bring back Dearness Johnson has no bearing on their financial situation. Also, the Browns currently have $37 million in cap space. So whatever you're going to save by trading the $1.3 million of Kareem Hunt's base salary that's remaining on his deal isn't worth losing the options that you have running the ball. Like, this team with Jacoby Brissett at quarterback is going to need to hand the ball off 30 to 35 times a game to be the best version of their offense. And I think you want to give yourself as many possible chances to have a reasonable, reliable running back in those spots as humanly possible. I also think that Kareem Hunt does very different things than what Nick Chubb and Dearness Johnson are going to be able to do as receivers. I mean, even the little goal line play they ran yesterday, he was at fullback, having that wrinkle is really important. So I think it depends on the team. If you're a team that doesn't necessarily need all of these playmakers and all of these skill sets at running back, you don't need 3 guys that could potentially handle the load for you. But if you're built like the Browns are, I think that having those 3 guys is almost a necessary bit of team building for them to be the offense they want to be over the next 10 weeks.
Yeah, this is a very context-dependent question. I think for the Browns situation, and you answered it really well, why would you trade Kareem? You've got all this cap room. It's a run-dominant offense. The quarterback situation is what it is. I saw a stat right before we came on that the 2 guys who led the NFL in, I think it was tackles broken or guys missed or whatever that metric is, it was Nick Chubb and Jonathan Taylor, like the 2 guys that we think are the best running backs in the NFL. And you can say O-line doesn't, or running backs don't matter, only the O-line matters, but like at some point you're going to get tackled, and it'd be nice to be able to get more yards than what was expected given the blocking. And there's also an element of the running back being able to set up the blocking that I don't know, if this comes out in the data and how well they're able to kind of marry the O-line versus the running back. But like, once we got, Shady McCoy, he did things I'd never seen a running back do before. And, he didn't play with us that much. And by halfway through the year, he kind of didn't play anymore for us. But like in the few games that he did, like he did things I'd never seen where he's just like running to the right, and boom, plants and goes left. Well, all that running to the right and having all of his focus to the right, that ran the linebacker into the center, and now the center blocked him and he made the cut off of it. So there's elements of that where really good running backs make the offensive line better, and it might not be stuff that you can grade or that you can see unless you're like really, really looking for it. But I do think they obviously work in tandem. The Barry Sanders is the extreme example of just being a guy who can make anything happen, but also having the most negative plays in history as a running back. So, the O-line has to be good to allow you some level of success. It's just, you want 3 guys at the beginning of the year that you feel like, all right, if 2 of them are down, this one guy can carry the load for me. And then I'll bring up a guy on practice squad. Because the chances of getting through a season unscathed in the running back room is as close to 0 as you can have.
All right, we're going to take one more quick break. We'll get back with a couple more questions before we get out of here. Guys, it's no secret that women love beards and we love growing them. Or trying to, at least. But having a great looking beard requires work. Whether it's beard growth oils, styling products, or top of the line trimmer, there's a small army of products required to grow your best beard. Luckily, Beard Club is here to help. As the leader in beard first men's growth and grooming, Beard Club delivers quality hardware and consumables that'll get you a better, thicker, and fuller looking beard. I've had a beard for, most of my adult life, and I've loved the products from Beard Club. I've been using the beard shampoo and the beard balm consistently. When the beard gets a little bit longer in the fall and winter months, it's really important to keep it shaped, make sure it's not getting all over the place, and the beard balm is huge in making that happen. Head to beardclub.com/maze, take the beard quiz, and use my code MAZE at checkout. They'll recommend a grooming kit that's tailored to your beard's needs. The highlight of the grooming kit is the PT45 trimmer. It's truly a beard-changing device. There's no painful hair pulling, it's sturdy as hell, and has amazing battery life. This is the same trimmer that NBA player James Harden uses. Yes, he's also an investor in the company. The growth kit features sprays to strengthen and moisturize your beard hair, oils that prime follicles for optimal growth, and a derma roller that rejuvenates dormant hair follicles. No matter what type of beard you have, Beard Club has the perfect kit to fit your needs. Beard Club, over 2 million beards served. Grow your best beard today and take 20% off your first order when you go to beardclub.com/maze and use code MAZE. That's beardclub.com/maze, code MAYS for 20% off your first order. Sunday Night Football is back on Peacock and NBC. Experience live games, full replays, exclusive post-game breakdowns, and so much more. Watch the biggest and brightest stars like Tom Brady and Patrick Mahomes conquer the gridiron and fuel your fandom with commentary from the hottest talent in the booth and the studio. Hear Mike Tirico with the play-by-play, commentary from Chris Collinsworth, Melissa Stark on the sideline, and Maria Taylor with pregame coverage. When you stream Sunday Night Football on Peacock, you'll get access to tons of live sports, hit shows, new movies, and more, like the NBC Sports virtual channel. It's your always-on destination for sports talk and news, with great shows like Pro Football Talk, Brother from Another, and Chris Sims Unbuttoned. Join today and stream whenever you want, wherever you want. Because if it's made for Sunday night, it's made for Peacock and NBC. All right, we got one more voicemail. Beller, cue it up for us.
Hi, guys. Love your show. Big fan. I'm here in Chicago as well. I was wondering why, as of late, you don't really see strong safety and free safeties listed on rosters, and if you do, they're interchangeable. I've been a Niners fan for a long time, and I remember on our 2012 team we had Deshaun Goldson, who was firmly the free safety, and Dante Whitner, who's firmly the strong. Bills are, they have a highly vaunted safety combo, Jordan Poyer, Mike Hyde, but I can't really put my finger on who's the strong and who's the free there. Is that something that's new in defensive schemes, or am I missing something? Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay, before you jump in, before that guy even said he was a Chicago fan, which was very early in the voicemail, I was like, this dude has to be from Chicago. And I'm not good with accents or anything. I was like, oh my God, this is a Chicago guy right off the bat.
It doesn't jump out to me because it's everyone I ever talked to over the course of my daily life.
Yeah, no, it was pretty apparent. I heard that one.
It's fantastic. This is a pretty easy one. I think that as we've moved to a world where a lot of teams are kind of basing out of too high looks and playing those shells on early downs, you need two interchangeable safeties. And, there are roles. If you look at what like Chauncey Gardner-Johnson's going to be for the Eagles, for example, right? You want him as the down safety more often as you want him as the post safety. But I think having guys that you can play in either one of those scenarios is a huge part of just modern defenses, because the benefit of those pre-snap too high shell looks is that it can turn into anything. And if we're to turn into anything, you need safeties where either of them could rotate down. So I think this is just kind of an expression of where the league is heading defensively on the defensive side of the ball. I don't know if it's any more complicated than that.
I don't think so. And I think it's only really important from the fan perspective too, which, for the teams that are going into a week, they've scouted and they're not saying, well, this guy's listed a free safety, but he plays like, it's like, no, this is the down safety. This is the free safety. This is the guy who plays more deep. It's just more for fans who want to know, like, all right, I know Jamal Adams is a strong safety. He's probably going to be in the box more. And I know, Earl Thomas is the free safety, so he's going to be the deep guy. So I think it's just a little bit more important for the fans to kind of get that easy kind of knowledge of, hey, free or strong. But obviously for teams, like, it has no effect at all because the film was going to tell them who plays in what role.
Last one here. Eric Brignan asks, It was a bit hard to tell on the broadcast, but it looked like the Saints center, Eric McCoy, started making protection calls when the team went to hurry up. And after that, the Falcons didn't get any more pressure on Jameis. Do you know if it's common for teams to switch who calls protections during hurry up compared to the regular offense? And does it really make as big a difference as it seemed like in this game? This is for you, buddy.
It doesn't make, it doesn't make like a huge difference in terms of like, oh, well, McCoy was the one doing it, so this is the reason the protection is working. It probably was a 2-minute drill, and the D-line maybe got a little more tired, and things were happening a little faster, and the Saints just blocked better. I think it's probably as simple as that. But it's an excellent question because, yes, teams that are quarterback dependent on making all the protection calls, once you get into the 2-minute drill, for the most part, they're 1-word calls, they're 2-word calls, and he's going to be a lot more inclined to think about like, oh, is it trips? Is it doubles? Oh, trips right. Got to make sure my 3 guys are out there in the right splits. And now I'm calling the play. And now it's say Chiefs. And is this guy, 4 yards from the hash instead of 2 yards from the hash? And within Chiefs, it's baked in, maybe it's 2 jet and the offensive line can handle 2 jet, just slide to the left. Like, so in that instance, the quarterback is doing so many other things with the offense, making sure guys are aligned, making sure things are set, everyone's up on the ball, that you do put some of that onus on the offensive line in the center in particular. So it's not something that's uncommon. I don't think it led to the reason for the Saints blocking them better, but I think it's a really awesome observation, honestly. I'm pretty impressed that this question was asked and it was seen, that there's a center who's now taking protection calls when he wasn't before. But yeah, it's something that kind of just helps speed things up because if the quarterback has to do all those other things and then take a look at the defense and then see if the rotation means I got to switch it and all that stuff. It's like, no, we'll leave the protection of the O-line. We'll leave the rest of the scheme to the quarterback and then get up, snap the ball. Let's go.
Awesome. Well, that's all we got. Appreciate you doing this. Appreciate you helping us kick off week 1. It was very good to have you back on the show. It was very good to talk to you. I'm going to let you get back to your rigorous golf routine now.
No, the current routine is still dealing with house renovation. And I've got like 8 different people at the house right now. So I got to go help out downstairs.
All right. We will be back tonight on this very YouTube channel. Me and Mike Sando will be reacting to Seahawks Broncos. Going to be a lot to talk about pretty much no matter how that game goes. So I feel pretty comfortable saying we'll have a decent amount to talk about after the game is over. In the meantime, if you guys could please subscribe to the YouTube channel if you have not. We've added a bunch of subscribers since we started doing this stuff. Like I've mentioned many, many times over the last couple of weeks, we're going to have a lot more YouTube content. Later today on Monday, Nate's first Winding the Clock, which is our little X's and O's segment that's going to be tied to our Sunday night podcast, is going to be coming out. So please go check that out. Me and Sando will be doing our reaction. Our Thursday shows are going to be live with me, Nate, and Deontay every single week. So please subscribe. Also, please subscribe to The Athletic, theathletic.com/football show. That's always something you guys should be doing if you do not have a subscription. And if you could, rate and review the podcast. Go leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, wherever you happen to listen, and you can review. It would mean a lot to us. Season's getting started. So if you like the show, let us know. We will be back tomorrow with Ollie Connolly from Read Optional, talking about some of the units that we really wanted to dig into a little bit more after week 1, now that we've got a chance to look at the film. Until then, appreciate you guys listening. We'll talk to you soon.